deals. Now you have 6 now. All right. Now that the hustlers are finished hustling, glad you all are back with us for the afternoon. I just wanted to call you all to order so that we can have the afternoon part of our program start. So you will notice that there's a gentleman stood begging for your attention over there. That is Howard Presley. He is the head of consumer and third-party risk proposition. Everyone has the word for it's job titles. He'll tell you what the other half of his job title is if you listen attentively. But he's going to give us an afternoon keynote on making the most of the sustainable value chain data. So please welcome him onto the stage.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Yeah. Louder? Louder. Okay. So I have the dangerous post-lunch slot. I hope you all enjoyed a very, very light lunch and many cups of coffee that we were taking through this afternoon. I'm really delighted to be here today to talk about the role of data within sustainability. And many thanks to T4SD for inviting Thomson Reuters to join in and take part. My name is Howard. I head up our customer and third-party risk business within EMEA for Thomson Reuters. Hopefully many of you will have heard of Thomson Reuters. Our company has been enabling professionals in the financial and risk, the legal, the tax and accounting, and the media market space for many years. Our mission statement is to provide professionals with the data intelligence, the technology, and the human expertise they need to find trusted answers. And using these combined assets, we are very proud to have been engaging in discussions on some of the world's greatest sustainability challenges. So we share trusted answers on global topics through channels such as sustainability.tr.com. And in 2015, our employees volunteered over 116,000 hours of their expertise to organisations and causes across the globe. I've actually just spent 3 days up at the Cybos Financial Services event, and it was very interesting to have been there and then come here and to actually see some really common themes emerging around data. And to understand why data is so very important, we must primarily recognise the environment in which we live. Firstly, our world is facing a growing population, projected to reach around 9 billion by 2050. And with that, increasing resource scarcity. In fact, FAO estimates that agricultural production must rise by around 60% by 2050 in order to feed a larger population. Yet around 80% of our arable land is already in use. Droughts, floods, fires, and freezes all do their damage directly to global crops. Yields suffer and people suffer. Indeed, our analysis of Thomson Reuters shows direct correlation between food insecurity and social instability. Secondly, an increasingly competitive global landscape means that many organisations are moving their labour-intensive supply chains to low-cost producing countries, which in turn creates significant concern around exploitation of workers and protection of human rights. Thirdly, corruption. Corruption is fueling inequality and preventing funds reaching those in society who need it the most. Africa is losing about $50 billion every year to illicit financial flows. 4 countries are losing $1 trillion a year to corruption. And the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund estimate the volume of money laundering to be between 3 to 5% of global GDP, which is equivalent to approximately 2.2 to 3.6 trillion annually. The world's poorest, many of whom are farmers, fishers, and pastoralists, are being hit the hardest by higher temperatures, the increasing frequency of weather-related disasters, by the diversion of funds which could support development and infrastructure projects. Poverty, political instability, income inequity, and overconsumption in some regions of the world all play pivotal roles. When people lack food, When they lack shelter, security, they're much more likely to move, seeking better livelihoods. This in turn makes them vulnerable to exploitation by human traffickers or by corrupt labour brokers offering them transit or jobs in return for a fee. This ultimately results in some of the terrible suffering that we have seen of Syrian refugees or migrants working as slaves on fishing boats in Thai waters. For the private sector, sustainability is important as companies progressively recognise their role as good corporate citizens. And thankfully, it's also increasingly demanded by consumers, investors, and by global frameworks such as the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And now, businesses find themselves operating in an environment that is increasingly regulated for issues that once were considered purely reputational risks. So the lines certainly are shifting, and businesses need to be ahead of the curve. The good news is that the increase in open data initiatives and focus on increased transparency and advances in technology are leading to more data availability and making our global world even more connected. We produce more data today than we ever have before, but the real power of data is unlocked when the information is joined up and shared. Data allows you to move from guessing to informed decision making. Technology provides better, more accurate, and more timely data covering broader geographical range. But even more importantly, technology helps to make sense of all this data, turning it into actionable results that we use across commodities and supply chains. Big data helps to drive sustainability, right from agricultural data tracking, environmental risk mapping, through to identifying slavery in supply chains. And there are various examples of companies using big data to drive sustainability. So data actually has the power to transform how large businesses can take action on sustainability. And the drive for data collection can also incentivize smaller suppliers to be more responsible in their own operations due to this domino or trickle-down effect through the supply chain. However, as we all know, the sustainability landscape is rapidly changing. There are various new standards and certifications, so businesses not only need to keep up to date with trends, but also to be flexible and nimble. Until relatively recently, businesses struggled to even get a full picture of the impact of their own operations. Even for something relatively simple, such as energy consumption, the information required to get an accurate understanding was kept in separate documents in varying formats and across multiple sites. But now it's great to see that leading businesses, such as Nike and IKEA, are trying to understand the entire end-to-end impact of their businesses throughout the whole value chain. This includes looking at what's happening outside the boundaries of the business, including raw materials, third parties, distributors, and suppliers. But there are plenty of challenges and complexities within global supply chains. Human trafficking, for example, where even the best technology falls short if used in isolation. So it's extremely encouraging to see that businesses are not only harnessing and analysing more data, but they're also collaborating with it. Organisations that used to operate in their own silos are now combining their resources to make an impact together. For example, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data is an organisation of governments, companies, and international groups that strive to achieve sustainability goals by pooling their data sets to realise a more open, new, and usable data to help end extreme poverty, combat climate change, and ensure a healthy life for all. The Bangladesh Accord is another example where many stakeholders have supported one plan, leading to a bigger effect that they would not have been able to achieve by working individually. So as these issues converge and intensify, we are very much forced to confront perhaps the most critical questions. How can we leverage sustainability goals to drive better livelihoods whilst ensuring a sustainable future for our planet and for generations to come? The answer lies in the data. However, even if we accept the answer may lie in the data, how do we get to it, and how do we cope with the ever-increasing volume of data? Despite an increasing number of open data initiatives to encourage data sharing, there is still no global data pool and no coordinated approach to data collection. However, initiatives that look to make data more open and shareable are indeed on the increase. Strides have been made in pushing for global open registries of beneficial ownership to help companies understand who they're really doing business with. And as already highlighted, some organisations are looking to pull their existing data sets around a common sustainability objective. However, as many of you will know, this space is absolutely beset with challenges. On the supply side, small producers, some of whom may not even have an internet connection, are increasingly buckling under the burden of ever-increasing data demands. How can we support that? Will data sharing give small producers better access to the global economy, or will it actually preclude them from even joining? What happens if they are on a journey to, but not yet meeting minimum standards? In these scenarios, does data make exceptions for good intention? Should a company who is failing to meet the standards, but who has a happy workforce and a commitment to continuous improvement, be given some leeway? So where is the human intelligence needed to complement the data? And on the demand side, what do companies truly need? Does the information need to be bespoke to the company's individual requirements, or should it be based on collecting data in volumes? Collecting, analysing and using data has a huge cost. And collecting information from different suppliers manually via surveys or via an audit process poses significant burdens on companies. In a study of senior UK procurement professionals carried out last year, only around 11% of businesses reported that they have relationships with suppliers at all stages in their supply chain. So data is clearly still not available at all tiers to enable companies to make fully informed decisions. There is also increasing regulatory pressure. Even within the financial services sector alone, is hit with over 50,000 regulatory updates a year. That's nearly one every 10 minutes. The stakes have never been higher. In fact, the Thomson Reuters Regulatory Intelligence Service calculates that an average of 200 international regulatory changes and announcements were captured daily in 2015, and again so far in 2016. The regulatory environment, much like supply chains, is becoming more and more complex, requiring overall a more holistic approach to assess the risk of companies. Other challenges in supply chain risk assessment obviously include a lack of visibility in the supply chain, lack of robust data and records, cultural norms preventing transparency or sharing of information, social handicaps such as low literacy skills, deliberate misrepresentation of falsification of documents and data, and many, many more. So the approach needed to assess risk is no longer just a first-tier assessment, but rather a holistic and systematic one. The question is, what data is a critical need and what is a nice to have? We shouldn't collect data just because we can. There needs to be a true understanding of how to monitor, measure and manage data in a timely fashion. Then, how do we link it to impacts and effectiveness? And in essence, for sustainable value chains, we really need to focus on just that, impacts and effectiveness. But we know that data is only as good as the answers it reveals. Data is fragmented, it's incomplete, it comes from multiple sources at different times and in different languages. So how can we get information that is globally standardized, but also locally relevant and locally actionable? But to delve into this a little, I'd like to highlight 3 core areas where we can better leverage and enhance sustainability value chain data, with some examples from Thomson Reuters as well as some other industry players. Firstly, I'd like to look at big data and how we can better combine, analyze and standardize existing data sets. Secondly, I'd like to look at how we glean other information directly from supply chains and on-the-ground networks. And thirdly, I'd like to look at entirely new approaches to the problem and share some innovative and interesting examples. So firstly, with big data, as I've already highlighted, just keeping up with regulatory changes or the changes in risk profiles of countries, organisations or individuals is a significant challenge. There is a huge amount of publicly available information accessible, but the challenge is keeping it current, as well as curating, aggregating and analysing. And this is where Thomson Reuters and others can help by aggregating and making sense of large volumes of existing data. We help companies keep up to date with regulation and to identify, assess and monitor customer and supply chain risks in the volume that individual companies simply would not have the resources to do. We do this through tools such as country risk ranking and world check. We employ hundreds of researchers globally to monitor over 530 sanctions, watch lists, regulatory and law enforcement lists, along with hundreds of thousands of other information sources to ensure we provide timely information on geopolitical risks. Using this approach, we often identify heightened risk individuals or entities months or sometimes even years before they actually appear on official lists. As for other organisations, the US Bureau of International Labour Affairs have identified that gold, cotton and sugarcane are the top 3 commodities produced by child or forced labour. The Global Slavery Index highlights the countries with the highest absolute numbers of people in modern slavery are India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Uzbekistan. Several of which, of course, provide the low-cost labour that produces consumer goods markets in Western Europe, Japan, North America and Australia. So by incorporating these different types of findings and overlaying the data onto their own supply chain networks, companies can have a much better understanding of where their main risks and material impacts lie, and subsequently where to prioritise their efforts. But to my second point, what about when the data simply doesn't exist? How can we use alternative data resources to complement what already exists and incorporate more on the ground? Take the case of modern slavery. There's a business saying that what gets measured gets managed. But how can we actually measure and manage the modern slavery issue, which is complex and often hidden deep in the global supply chain? Credible data on this issue is still very hard to find. Efforts to tackle the modern slavery problem are limited not only by the lack of data, but also by its quantity, its type, and its accessibility. And although modern slavery does indeed leave a data footprint, it's very difficult to detect and report due to a lack of hard data. This challenge can absolutely lead to companies drastically underestimating the risk of modern slavery in their current supply chains. According to the latest Global Slavery Index, there are over 45 million people in some form of modern slavery worldwide, the largest proportion of which are estimated to be held in forced labour. Thomson Reuters research shows a very high correlation between money laundering and slavery risk and corruption and slavery risk. This means that there is the opportunity to utilise other data sets that can be a proxy for modern slavery. At some point, the proceeds of trafficking and slavery will emerge in the financial system, thereby offering the opportunity to turn global anti-money laundering initiatives and the power of data analytics onto corrupt labour brokers, slavery perpetrators, and people traffickers. With this in mind, even in the absence of a criminal conviction for slavery, Thomson Reuters have already been developing slavery typologies and even detailed profiles of what modern slavery activity looks like. The problem was that so much activity had yet to be brought to light, or more so to court, that what was really needed was the kind of frontline information that is collected by NGOs. So we engaged in a pilot project with the NGO Liberty Asia to try to combine the on-the-ground knowledge and expertise of their anti-slavery networks with the intelligence, technology, and research capabilities of Thomson Reuters using our World Check tool. World check data is gathered from verifiable public domain information on individuals and organisations affiliated with financial and other crimes, and assists our customers in identifying heightened risk of individuals and entities and the related networks. This sort of information, which is by its very nature very hard to find, can not only help investors and companies steer clear of questionable dealings with traffickers and forced labour brokers, but perhaps better data could also be the key to disrupting slavery. To support scaling of the impact, we've been working with Liberty Asia and have worked to extend a training programme for NGOs to create a better understanding of the impact and the effectiveness of data to tackle modern slavery. Existing trainings on data gathering and methodologies have already led to improved skill sets within the NGOs. Not only did this lead to a better ability to share data, but it also better aligns the work with other effective initiatives, such as financial action task forces, inclusion of human trafficking to predatory crime to money laundering. The impacts and insights from this pilot are already being seen, with hundreds of new profiles being added to the Thomson Reuters World Check database, which already profiles and provides clients with access to over 60,000 profiles related to human trafficking and human rights abuses. In addition to World Check, we are now building a proof of concept for a slavery data platform, which is focused on aggregating global data around forced labour and human trafficking from organisations on the ground. Modern slavery is absolutely a global challenge, and we are very proud to be a part of the solution. And finally, innovative new technologies which are critical to the challenge of sustainability. Global Forest Watch, for example, is an initiative convened by the World Resources Institute to use satellite data to monitor and track tree cover loss. This project leverages new technologies to move from on-the-ground networks to networks in the sky, something that is truly global but has the power to provide real-time data at a local level that can be mapped against supply chain operations, sawmills, etc., etc. Similarly, Raptor Maps were winners of the Thomson Reuters sponsored entrepreneurship competition. Raptor Maps use camera-loaded drones to quickly scan areas of planted fields and detect the earliest signs of pests and disease. They use multispectral cameras combined with multiple sources of data to create highly precise maps of analysed crops. And finally, Thomson Reuters DataShare is a mobile application used to collect information on crops directly from farmers, providing aggregated insight normally only available to professional agriculture traders. This sort of aggregated information is highly valuable and would never be accessible without all of the different parties working together. So as we've seen from some of these examples, multi-stakeholder collaboration is key, not just between buyers and suppliers, but also amongst technology and sustainability experts. The private sector certainly has a key role to play, but civil society and governments are also critical in driving the agenda. Governments have vast amounts of valuable data that they can make available and transparent. In fact, the US government was one of the founding partners of the Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition. Golden focuses on building high-level policy on both public and private institutional support for open data, but more can still certainly be done in governments. So to conclude, and as you move into your next session this afternoon looking at connected and unconnected, I want to leave you with a few final thoughts. Data is clearly a key component of tackling sustainability, but to really make a difference, it needs to be overlaid with new technologies and with very creative thinking. And although we've already come a long way, have we jumped the gun a little bit? We've talked about what data we need, we've talked about how to collect it, how to analyse it, but are we now in a situation where we have lots of different standards measuring the same thing in lots of different ways? And this is where tools such as ITC's standards map go a long way in making information valuable. Exposing supply chain issues or complex challenges like corruption are usually hindered not by the lack of data, by the difficulty in understanding the true meaning and connections to the data as a whole. The data must be well described so that users can understand exactly what the data is about. It's also important to know where the data comes from, who created the data, who influenced the data, and to work in partnerships with other data providers to form a holistic picture. So success depends on adopting an open and collaborative culture that promotes the very expectation that data must be prepared to be shareable. For any software program to work, there must be a common operating system or shared platform foundation. The same is true of data. It must not just be comparable, it must, by default, be structured and be shareable. Business transactions occur on a global scale. Sustainability challenges are global, and this must be powered by global data. This is both an ethical and a commercial necessity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Howard. There was a lot in there. I was making focus notes. So let's see if we can take some of that high-level stuff and distill it into a specific context, and that's the context of the unconnected, the last mile, the bottom of the pyramid, if you will. We're about to start session 3, which is that unconnecting the unconnected. So please, can you welcome up to the stage Catherine Tavares, who is the new sector, or head of new sector development, there she is. At GS1 Columbia, Amy Barthel, who is the head of business development at Wheat Farm. Wayne Foster, please come up. Traceability program. Your names are also on this side, so you can come up and spot them there. I learned that too late myself, so it's useful to know. And Anthony Sigma, who is the president of the Federation of Associations of Ghanaian Exporters and Ghana Yam Development Council. No, you're not Anthony. No. Okay. I'm not looking at any sort of African man there. No, Anthony. This is the bit where I should have gone and looked for Anthony during the lunch break and what not to do. Oh, he is Anthony. I'm playing games with my mind. Okay. Aquaba. Okay. Great. Okay, so each of, I guess, following with the same principles as before, let us start with our, Bruce, are you ready? We're going to have our Mentimeter question. You can see that I have had lunch. So if you get your devices at the ready, ladies and gentlemen, so that we can all participate in this. So the question for you, and if you don't remember how to get there, is using your mobile phone, grab your phone, go to www.mentimeter.com, enter the code 669191 for this session, and you should then be able to participate in our flash poll or flash survey. So the question for you on this particular session is, what are the main impediments to scaling up internet and other types of modern connectivity as you see them? Do you think it's regulatory or privacy issues, lack of investor interest, lack of technical know-how, cost, literacy, and user readiness? Thank you to that one person who has taken the survey. Let's see how the rest of you get on. As you take it, we will start to show the results. So by way of context then, it's going to show us how it's going. This is the bit that everyone becomes excited about. By everyone. Interesting. So far the view is that cost is the impediment. So we're going to let that settle. And Carol, can I do something slightly different with this? We'll come to the sort of set questions, but I wonder if you could each just have a comment on what we've seen here. And your view from where you sit, whether or not you think so. In a sense, taking the survey yourself and just sharing with us. You know, how do you feel? How far you see this as a reflection of your own views? So, okay, going with that as our sort of baseline, if you like. Let's start with you, Catherine. Can you tell us whether, just a few of your views on this? Do you see, from the colonial perspective, that cost is the main thing?
So I completely agree. Yes. And so I agree with the outcomes. I think that in Colombia, main barriers are cost of access to technology. But this is very important to announce that people that come to have that interest in order to get new opportunities around national affairs or technology. Different could be addressed in fact or using theory. This is the way to cover by technology watching. That is something that is one of the most important. And maybe our current projects as well as
Okay, well, when we get to the sort of formal part of the discussion, we look forward to hearing more about that. Do you agree from a regional perspective across the country to review that?
yeah, so I think I do agree it's cost, but I think we've taken it as we found a step back and we actually look at doing have access to the internet too. So I guess our position is slightly back there, but I agree. I mean, we work across Peru, Uganda, and Kenya, and it's certainly, I mean, we work with our technology target is 500 million small farmers around the world, and less than 20% of us actually have access to the internet. So it's a very cost and definitely valid.
Thank you. Clear from South Africa?
Thank you. From a South African perspective, I would disagree. In the context of smallholder farmers, and part of that is historic, where people in what we used to call the homelands were not required to go to school. So a huge issue that we have is poor literacy and user readiness. We also, as a result, have a lack of interest because it's not a typical appealing any type of sector. Lack of technical know-how of users is a factor, but even before then, a lack of knowing what is expected. So, given that scenario, we are caught up in South Africa with development and ongoing development of regulatory requirements in line with the rest of the world, and certainly we have the private standards and everything else. So the smallholder farmers are in a high percent. The cost comes in maybe when we cost it.
So that's really interesting. I'm glad that there's some disparities there so that we don't, as we often tend to do, assume that the South or the developing countries all have the same experience. But what about the Ghanaian?
Well, from my own experience and what I know, I think a lack of interest was one. I'll place that one first. Lack of interest because the regulations, standards, and whatnot are not a requirement in the local market. So if I comply with what is required on the external market, it's of no value to me. And so everything that I produce based on the standard that I'm able to manage. So it's not, so I'll take that first. And then because of the lack of interest, there's no knowledge. The technical expertise also lack. What then we can talk about costs.
I just find this fascinating, ladies and gentlemen, that out of the four speakers, two have highlighted lack of interest, and yet in this room with the expertise that's here, lack of interest is from a technical perspective, things that we see as least important, least important, and yet coming from a sort of country from the ground up, they're saying that actually a lot of producers, a lot of farmers don't even have the interest, let alone meeting the cost. So when we're thinking about interventions and solutions, how much are we aligned with what farmers have identified as their number one competitors? So thank you very much for that. Let's go back to the names of our speakers. And perhaps if there's time at the end, we might do this again, switching it up. But let's start with you, please, Catherine, first, because you represent GS1, so the global standard in Colombia. So share a bit your experience of getting adoption of that standard with your shareholders or your stakeholders rather.
Okay, just my standard to identify, capture, and share information has been a really strong tool for our more than 3 companies in our value chains. We have support from them. We have been deploying in different sectors our standards in order to get a more competitive industry. And it's a really hot experience to have more thousands of business case successfully deployed. So I think that G1 standards and long-time standards are really hard to make it more competitive. Make it easier or more real system because, for example, in the cloud sector, in the agriculture sector, in the general sectors, we have to bring actors that are involved in all our topics. And it's not just from one side, it's like you can find different kind of and solve the problem. So this is my solution from our
From the organizational perspective, do you see that there is a mandate to connect the connected as we're talking about here? Is that something that you see as something that your organization exists to do?
I think that disability has to be it's a gap. So we have like that risk that could get the information there for students and how the thing happens and make it possible to the communication process and to the correct tools that make people that can process.
Amy, we want to hear more. You're saying that farmers, you don't even start with the sort of connectivity. Tell us more about what the farm does and how then we can have a conversation about standards with those.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, we're kind of looking at 5 million small farmers around the world who produce 70% of our population, live in isolation, they're miles away from the nearest town, so internet access isn't enough for them. So when they have problems in their farms, they do what they do. So that's kind of where we comes in, and we built a platform that enables farmers to text questions about problems they have on their farms using a very basic mobile phone. And then we'll share that question with other farmers, crowdsource information back to them, all through their mobile phones, which means that they don't have to leave their farms, they don't have to have internet access, and they don't have to spend any money. It's completely free for farmers to use that platform. So we launched in February 2015, and since then, 85,000 farmers have been using our platform for anywhere from Europe and Uganda. So this has generated about 30 million pieces of information being shared between farmers who don't have access to the internet. So refarming itself is a knowledge sharing platform, but the flip side of that is that we've been collecting, capturing all these conversations and building the bank of new agricultural knowledge from these rural communities. So it's actually unseen knowledge because these guys aren't connected to another platform. So it kind of, in the context of this conversation, we're looking at open data in the sense that it's data from these communities, for these communities, and making it available to them. So that's the way we kind of look at data. And obviously, once we start to analyze all this data that we've been capturing, we can start to identify trends such as drought and crop patterns and disease, all from these real data. So we provide a window of that.
I was really interested by it's a very quick uptake in such a short space of time. And I remember hearing, I think it was on Wednesday's presentation and even yesterday on the sustainability map, the question is how do you want farmers to themselves sign up? How do you get them to know? So what are your lessons and how have you got so many farmers to know about your platform so quickly?
So we work with the local farming cooperatives in the country. Radio shows, the plus radio shows on they by users. So one radio show has 5,000 users. And we do TV shows, we look at the kind of distribution networks, with organizations such as NGOs or research groups, and sort of partnerships and multinational they're working on. But we're trying lots of different things.
I hope we can talk a bit more about this a little later because I'm a bit of an ICT beginner and was writing about, in preparation, how low-tech interventions, when we think about technology, we think about trying to get the poorest onto the platforms where we're on, and that actually people are still using radio and other things that we wouldn't consider technological or innovative to disseminate information. So perhaps we can look at how some of that stuff, how we can challenge, how we can design technology. But Gwyn, your work in South Africa is a bit of a dichotomy because it has such extremes. So tell us, in terms of standards, in terms of the needs of the farmers that you work with, what are those farmers looking for and what are the sorts of conversations you have?
Okay. First of all, this is mainly private sector driven. Simply gave up after a while and expecting government to solve problems and smallholder farmers in this sort of realm. The critical thing about the ground-up approach, which is what we're taking, is the uniqueness of the individuals, of every farm, of every community, and in South Africa, of every person. We do not, in the past, require people to go to school, so we cannot even assume that we have a common knowledge base of a particular level of school. In any group of 20 farmers, like we have people with postgrad degrees, and we can have people who are completely illiterate. So that is what the situation on the ground. A farm is also a multi-commodity affair. We don't only grow pitches, we also have chickens, we also have cattle, and so on. Many of the standards are single commodity, as we've heard, so we need to deal with that. It's vital to understand the starting point, and I have not heard that come through very strongly in forums such as this, and normally it doesn't. We know where we want people to go. If I want to travel to Durban and I climb in an aeroplane in Johannesburg or a bicycle in Cape Town, those are radically different journeys. And we need to understand the starting point in order to enable people to achieve that objective. Vital to grow local capacity. It's extremely arrogant to think that we can achieve significant change through projects that are time limited. When they talk about beneficiaries, these are partners in business. They are not benefiting from my knowledge. And when I run out of money and the project ends, we go away and we've not yet enabled the local communities. We are talking about agri-hubs because information is critical, and we're saying don't expect every farmer to conform. So select people in the administration, select people who have the capacity to become assessors, who have the interest to become assessors, and take it from there. And we are talking about a new services industry, as I indicated earlier, which is technology basically on demand, but supporting the agricultural industry, which I believe is expected to make a part. What really kicked the venture that I'm representing into the ballpark, I guess, I've had the privilege for the last 2 years of working with the military veterans, previous freedom fighters, and we have a very disciplined group of people who are intelligent, who follow structure, who have not been absorbed into the South African society. And this provides the opportunity to redirect their skills and their experience into the implementation, the monitoring, the training, and the assessments that go along with standards compliance. So we talk about fit for purpose, for instance. We talk about, as I say, new services industry, and there are selection mechanisms. I'm not part of that. Saying who are the people who might be interested in participating in this different world, which is different to business. We have done a very strong qualification of the need. Essentially, one of the commanders, who's part of our intelligence team, was assigned to me to find out whether this white woman frankly knows what she's talking about and whether this opportunity actually is exciting. And I spent a very exciting 8 months clinging to his coattails, learning aspects of ground politics that I had not expected. The way it works is that he handles the politics and then he says, okay, we're going to a meeting, it's with this or that community, and bring the printer because we will sign a contract, and that is what happens. So no problem at all getting contracts at various levels. Not always consistent, not always easy to predict from a time point of view. Contracts that we have signed cover with municipalities, cover with communities, traditional councils. We have land use agreements. They are all contracts in principle. So we are talking about meeting the requirements of standards. We are talking about record keeping. We are talking about growing local capacity. We then needed to go through, I needed to go through saying, what do we actually need by this? And that analytic phase and the formulation of the solution led to a couple of artifacts. One is we now have a very, very strong base to sell that to government. And the key agency is our National Agricultural Marketing Council, who are analytics and who have accepted that traceability is critical, who have accepted that information infrastructure should be treated as strategic. So we treat irrigation infrastructure as strategic, water pumps and water pipes, and if data is now a critical element to get into the market, be that a local market or international market, then data pumps and data pipes should be strategic. So we have now the opportunity of putting out in our rural areas a national network of infrastructure. That brings in one of the organizations, CARA, Community Agri-Hubs in Rural Areas, and that will be the nurturing effect. The aim of all of this is business. So we are looking at sustainable businesses. We broadly say 5 years, it might be longer. We need to understand, so we need to profile the organizations before we even decide on what the priorities are. But we're now going into that phase. What the National Agricultural Marketing Council has done, and part of what led to my being here, they've accepted the development of a system called TRIVIA, Traceability Information Value Impact application, within our own particular base. The critical aspect of that is using the GS1 system and developing a coding framework that can underpin all aspects of standards. Now that doesn't just go back to farm level, that goes onto the farm. So the global location number, as an example, might be joined with other attributes such as what is the location, what is the crop, and what is the season of the cycle, because that will attract from a food safety point of view specific strains, or it might be relevant or whatever. Individuals, there are schemes within the global standards GS1 operation where you can identify individuals, where you can identify the products. Comment was made earlier, whatever goes through a point of sale, that is got a global trade item in. There are other codes that identify logistics items. And we did a study in 2010 that says we can apply it to farming. So that is one of the uniques that we are doing. And once we have that traceability framework in place, we can put any data on top of it, be it food safety data. This is where the different accounting systems are. Every sustainable development goal criterion is an accounting system. Every fair trade requirement is an accounting system, and that is different to all that. And we have a chain of custody that goes. Carbon accounting is complex. It is a system in its own right. Spray accounting is complex. You need to know what you sprayed, when you sprayed, the strength and you sprayed it, and you may not put product within the building. So all of these aspects, one way or the other, apply at ground level. And the aim is to develop that competence locally in a controlled way, and we have government support to do that. Fit for purpose, supply chain to the point of sale or use, so your traceability control points are important. Your financial control points are important. I led the project many years ago that put pallet tracking of South African fruit through Europe, and we were very strictly reminded regularly that we export fruit and we import money. And that applies all the way down the line to a cooperative situation. How do we determine what farmer is paid what when there is a payment from higher up the line? Governance is critical, and we are, I'm not pretending that I want to manage the money in the circumstances that we're dealing with. We are not going to be looking at a lot of money coming in from a lot of different sources. We have appointed people to manage the corporate books, and we are in discussions with our export control board to do the program management. They have a very strong financial reputation and clean audits all the way through, which is good. And they have performed that function, including some of the ITC. So from that perspective, we're looking at a national program. We are looking at ground up. What it is going to take to make it work, quite frankly, is for me to continue working with military veterans, and I'm not very good at following instructions. They're not very good at accepting ground up ideas and everything that goes with that, and we can bring the Navy units into that as well. Fascinating environment, there's no reason why we can't.
Thank you. Thank you for that comprehensive look at the work that you're doing. Last but not least, let's get the perspective from Ghana and from you, Anthony, with the farmers that you work with. I just wanted to pick up the remark that you made when you were commenting on the earlier survey about farmers being, needing or mostly interested in their local markets, right? So I guess, do you think that there's some key pressure to focus on standards that apply for export, whereas farmers are trying to get their products access in local and regional markets as well?
Let me put it simply. These farmers who are operating according to international standards are doing it because they need to do it so that they get market access. So there are companies that are doing that. But from general agriculture, there's nothing operate like this one. And I'm trying to do something. So a comprehensive study that we understood. I don't have that kind of story. But farmers themselves, most farmers don't even see the need to apply kind of international standards that public standards are inclusive because they are not rewarded for that expense. Local markets do not pay premium for privately standard product for the market. So they are able to recover their costs. If I produce organic, at best I'll be able to sell maybe 20-30% of the farm produce as organic. What happened to the rest? Meanwhile, I have intended. So that is the reality on the ground. So for us, yes, standards are good. We see that they are very, very important. But as a national body, we are not making a decision on that yet. We're trying to get a decision, it doesn't have to. So it is not a priority for my government policy. ITC, international bodies government, staff program, we have many of the farmers who are complying with private standards have done so with support from NGOs and donor partners. Beautiful things that we are talking about using technology to back it. It's a thing.
And I would imagine that it's not just Ghana, it's Ghana and lots of other countries are
certainly.
Certainly. So then when you come together, it's like this, what is the priority that we're here talking about? Standardization, open data, that's what we further remove from the realities that you're working with.
Priority for me, it's one. Like I said yesterday, we need to have a conversation with organizations. We have to incur costs to comply with the standards that are being. Yes, the farmers are looking for traditional markets or approach so that we can increase our production so that we can be sustainable. And we need to do it according to your standards. Some of it we do not even know. Let alone how to comply with those standards. So we need some kind of support to do that then. So we need to have a conversation between the ultimate consumer and the producer. That, look, this is what you need to do to make me take your product. And if you do it, perhaps I will support you this way or that way. And the key for me is that if you ask me to produce organic for you, then you should be ready to take the product. Don't leave it on my hand and you get another bit that I get. It's already, I'm not getting enough for my.
I have so many more questions, and I just actually let me come back to you for a second, Catherine, because we could be talking about Ghana for much longer. But unlike what Gwen was saying about how you just kind of given up on the role of government, you work obviously with Dr. Understand in Colombia. What's the Colombian government's uptake with these issues and their involvement in driving programs?
We have lived historical moment, because after 2 years of armed force our country finally performed peace agreement. So the heart of this peace agreement was the agribusiness sector. And that's the reason why we are really in a country and everything is going on with a new place to expand. So the government is completely necessary in so they have been policy in both sector to this initiative. And we have looked at the new definition of agriculture. I mean, we have 45 years without information about real agribusiness sector. We have 45 years without information about what is our crops, about how many are, what about the farmers? What about the 11 million of farmers that are being part of our population? So for that reason, we really necessary the open data nowadays because we are trying to make our country be united. So for that reason, we think that it's a really interesting concept, and we have to hard working to deploy that concept. Finally, the last year we found that there are 5.2 agribusiness hectares in our country, and then from the agribusiness use. That's really important. That is a first perspective of our business and how we could go there and help them, but we need assistance, technical assistance to help them. So, for instance, the government has opened their data according to the public policy of that sharing and data politics. And then we could deploy all the strategy to involve different sectors of agribusiness economy in that project. That is amazing the way that they are really supporting this project. And in the next October 27, we are going to launch our cloud, our project, which is one of IPC in Colombia. And this is the first time that the government and ministry is really handling and facing these challenges because it's real and it's overwhelming. You can be concerned about what are the challenges that we are facing as a country, as a social environment, and economy. So we have to break
Do you think you can sustain government interest beyond political cycles?
Yes, I think that it is more or less 17,500 people from armed forces that currently are coming back to farming, coming back to that field of knowledge. And so we have a challenge. We have to change that knowledge from mind new example in open data. Trying with this community, we need to see our partners, we need to see and we need to have some process to activate that information in the right market.
Maybe there's some lessons they're doing from South Africa for Colombia, how to sort of reintegrate former military and use their skills in agriculture in a different way. Your organization isn't necessarily set up specifically to look at standards. It's about providing farmers with the information that they need. And so with all the data collected and connected, at what point do you start seeing that, if at all, farmers become interested in understanding more about standards, and do they ask questions about that at all, or are they asking more questions about pests and managing the farms, etc.?
Yeah, so obviously we've been looking at data that we collected for the last 18 months. And just to clarify what kind of data it is, so it's obviously raw SMS data, so questions and answers, and then we've also got user and profile information. So each farm, like a review farm, will give us information on their gender, their crop, and their age and their location. So we can start to disaggregate that. And then when we analyze all the different trends that are coming through, we go to different groups and compare, for example, women in Kenya talking about different concepts, etc. And so, yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, the farmers have never actually, since they've become standard certification, their kind of top concerns are practical disease management, soil fertility, access to market, so a bit more linked, so pricing information and where to buy, where to sell, so where to get capital, and then how to cope with climate change. So we have a lot of questions about El Nino, in Kenya it's like drought, so in the day-to-day. We did a piece of work with an organisation who wanted to find out, what were the challenges that smallholder farmers were facing for certification, and where we get overwhelming response there was, lack of capital and information. So, I think our role is really giving that a view of the reality on the ground. What are the farmers concerned about? What are the problems? And bringing it out so that we can make decisions and policies based on the reality on the ground. So I think that's really giving those farmers a voice and giving them context, a voice to hear, and even if they're not actually participating in the dialogue, to have their views heard from the person.
For anyone who is excited by the sort of success of the platform and the view that mobile phones will solve all the world's ills, how do you respond to the question on privacy, because you are asking for information on your users, and what are the things that from your experiences on mobile phone that doesn't do that?
So we will share personal information, so and then we aggregate that information and share I guess, we're not pretending to solve all the problems. We're not saying that we can replace any training programs, we're not saying that, we'll replace custody. We're just saying that, what the farmer needs an answer to when the chicks are dying, and, you take a week to go to the next decision maker about we're there to be able to provide them with the local relevant solutions in this space. So, for example, we had a farmer who chickens sent a message to me farm saying, these are the symptoms, what can I do? We sent that question to the farmer from there, and we were able to and we were able to say and that might not seem much, but to a farmer who sells a chicken at the answer and gets that information. And that's why I really can't agree.
That there's an external interest in a little growth because this is this indigenous knowledge, because as you said, we created a sort of resource base that farmers and farming people have. Has there been any interest in people wanting to see what farmers are doing to sustain their life?
Yes, I think, these smaller farmers vision of what Taylor intervention on the existence of the
And just as we went into creating this, a farmer who is advising a farmer who and vice versa, that's a great resource that often information is usually external outside in, right? And so is there now an opportunity for this indigenous knowledge to inform policy making? And have you had any interest in using the knowledge of I'm going to look at because you're talking about what the farmers are standards, obviously because the needs of selling their products and the limitations of the market. But for those that do, has sort of involvement in standards led to better practice across the farm. So you might have directly, you might sign up to an organic standard. You think that over time those farmers then change their practices on their farm within other areas. We've been talking about sustainable development goals and recognizing all of those things that connected. Can this one area take up a adopted standard, lead to more sustainable practices?
Essential is there, but it's early yet. I'm currently doing something with ITC, and what we've noticed is that the same farmer produces cocoa, produces other crops. But so far, no extension people are concentrating just on cocoa. They don't help that farmer to do or to produce the other crops. Neither have they helped that farmer to really find other markets for the other products. We're currently looking at it. We're also looking at what combination of crops will give that farmer a certain amount of living wage that will make that person remain on the farm. So the people is so as I said, it's only yet. So people are documenting it. They are also documenting details of the farmers, what their needs, what their wishes are, what's the hope to use the extra money that they are making in other crops. So I think it's interesting and maybe at a little bit when we have enough people to be able to sell and others start to get that farmer also needs to be done. We do other things that do that. There are multiple products.
Are you concerned about the sustainability of programs, given that, as you're saying, that you're looking dependent on NGOs or international partners to help you to introduce these?
As I said, that is why we're using the analysis approach. So that all the interest parties come, including the farmer himself or herself, bring some people in. So that at the end of the day, the farmer is the focus. The farmer himself or herself sees the need to do anything different, other than somebody there. And all he or she sees, even the money, even the money. And that is what makes it very interesting. We need more alliances, more support to extend it. Now it's very small, we only do 2 villages. But that's not a good. That's why everybody here is interested in this. I was very
Then you look at me wanted to comment there. Was I had an interested face? Say something? Okay. Well, let me open it up to the floor now. I found it a fascinating discussion. I was really looking forward to this. Oh, now you want to say something. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. I just want to put a couple of questions on. One is that South African history has a lot anyway, putting down government, complimentary forum, and I appreciate some of the comments. It used to be a regulated agriculture. When we deregulate, we sort of treat it as a so things like technical extension came from within the industry. We currently have the latest estimate is one extension services officer for 850 farms. When on top of that, you consider that our black population was not allowed to own a farm prior to 1994, we appreciate the fact that there's a very strong focus on the technical side and so on. From an information perspective, 100% is an issue. There are ways of getting over it. That is broad of the that it enables the local population. From a GS1 perspective, we go through loops. There was a very strong resistance at one stage of that to GS1. And that came down to either somebody not have GS1 could they be held accountable. Where we are now, and we've been through this as a groups, GS1 is in discussion with government. What we are doing, it's easier to do from the private side. I don't have to ask anybody's permission. So that is also influencing, but we work obviously very closely. So I just wanted to your comment about government and not picking it up. I just wanted to give some contrast to that.
Is there any way in South Africa or anywhere else, in your space or South Africa, of using technology, do you see that you can put technology to help you leapfrog so that you don't have to go one farm at a time? So tell us a bit about how
Well, take it. But I think we mustn't focus only on technology. It comes down to the skills to use it. My personal objective, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, I want the best pool of competent data, reporters and practitioners at ground level throughout South Africa. Those guys will have a global opportunity because in forums like this, in climate change discussion, none are looking at the reality of gathering data on the ground. So that's what I think.
Okay, guys, what do you want? Over to you, like a lawyer, what do you want? Anyone want to comment or ask a question at this point of our panel? Please do raise your hands so that we can see you. This room is alive and well. Thank you. Can we start with the lady at the front and then we'll go.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Enitande Hute and I'm a farmer from Nigeria. My question is to the We Farm lady, Catherine. When are you going to be present in Nigeria? Yes, we do have internet connectivity, don't get me wrong. But to tell you the truth, the biggest problem we have with our farmers is literacy. Because most of the villages where the small farmers are, who actually do produce less things, whose produce actually do go to waste, they're actually what I can tell you though is every single one of them has at least one mobile phone. So
do you mean Catherine from GS1 or Amy from
We Farm, sorry, Amy. It's Amy, sorry.
Kellen, you were listening very attentively.
Sorry, it's Amy. Sorry. No, it's because I think Catherine is, So now, sort of while we were talking, I did go on the We Farm website. I didn't say anything about Nigeria there, considering the fact that we do have millions of farmers that would really benefit from your services. When are you coming to Nigeria?
I do love that about my Nigerian neighbors. So any panel I ever chair, the Nigerian question is, so what's about Nigeria?
Well,
a lot of you, so it's a valuable question. Let's take the gentleman's question at the back and then there's a lady.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to say that I'm fully convinced of the advantages of standards and sustainable standards. Secondly, I know that, and I strongly believe that, no compliance, no trade. Then, I also believe that there is a huge potential for this new disruptive technology. However, And in my experience as an agronomist, for more than 20 years, working with huge farmers in South America who run thousands of acres and small holders in Africa. And I've seen farmers in more than 40 countries around the world. Whenever there's something coming up to a farmer, like standards, the farmer will probably have one comment and two questions. His comments will be, this is going to complicate my life. And there kicks in resistance to change. And you know how we human beings are in relation to change. Not to mention the resistance of farmers, which is huge as well. So then he has two questions. First one, what is it in for me? And second, and sorry if I insist, who is going to pay for this? So I want to strongly support the comments by our colleague, Mr. Sikpa. There's no contradiction of this, but we have to sit with farmers and see how do we get all the benefits that standards can give us.
So let me be cheeky and ask you a question. Because, so my question is this: given that you spent so long hearing these questions, what do you answer the farmers? What is it in it for you, and who bears the cost? What are you currently telling them?
Well, sometimes it's a technical question. As an agronomist, when you give an answer to a farmer, you have to show them what is the original proposition or the original situation in which they are, position A, and what happens when he goes to position B. But if he doesn't see clear things for him, going from A to B.
And what do you tell them about who's bearing the cost?
That is difficult to say. My belief is that usually it's either the consumer or the farmer who will pay for it. And I'm not sure that that is the fair answer.
The lady behind you, and then we'll take the other two.
Something to.
Hi everybody, my name is Alexandra and I come from Colombia as well. I think I want to comment here because our country has so much, right now, it's something to say, we have been a transition, we are in a moment which is historical. But our country has a background that is so complicated that if we want to understand it, we will have to stay here almost the whole day, that is for sure. More than that, it's an example of everything we have been speaking here the whole day. Because when we talk about what the correction is to the data, that is an example right now. I think beyond the agreement itself, is that now the agreement is open to everybody. So everybody has a possibility to have an opinion if they are good or not. And they're giving the conflict point what is going to be made in the agrarian sector in our country. What is the point with a company like DS1? That this is a company that is for the first time, that is really involved in working for the private sector with the public sector, which is in our country unlikely until now, because everybody was in their own interest. What is the fact of this data open to the farmers? And what is the challenge? To use the experience of the AD with their farmers and how they share the information with the various farmers from Kenya, so we can see how they want to develop these things. Give them everything and bear all the costs, because after 10 years, who's going to bear the cost, or how they are going to look at this still educated. And beyond that is the fact that we as a country, we had a potential that the countries and because we had so much resources that people cannot imagine and cannot imagine. Because of this war, that has everything down, and the information has been hidden, so the government has the capacity to play with the people as they want. That is for sure. That is something that is now changing, and that is the most important step we have taken. And it's what is going to be for the farmers, and them, to train them, so they can understand how to be productive by themselves, how to go through from being just a commodity supplier to a commercial supplier, and then just to become the supplier of the big potential, potential problem.
Can I just ask, because just so that I can synthesize it well, if there is one, I appreciate your comment. I was also wondering if there was a question that perhaps I missed, or are you just giving us
No,
the
I was
collective
really
context?
just
No, that's really valuable. I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't missed the question within
it's just a
the
comment because I know it's complicated. I know our country is a country many people know so many things, but nobody knows the whole background. And I was in the country because I live in Germany, and there was a discussion I had just with people from the company, like this week, and trying to understand and if to understand how is the war in Colombia works, because we don't have the usual war like people in Syria have. So it's other context, and we cannot compare. And we have many similarities with Africa, that is for sure, because the farmers hasn't been provided with the information or with the technology. But it's also, like you say, it's a big culture. It's not only about the cost, it's also about the literacy. Because the government also doesn't have the time to educate these people. And if they don't educate people, they are never going to have interest on this kind of stuff if they don't know this kind of military stuff.
Thank you for your comment. Let's take the gentleman here, then we'll come back. You're allowed if it's just a little briefer.
So, I'm from ITC, I just wanted to share.
Oh, from ITC, you're deaf. Sorry.
That's unfair.
That's just talking time.
That's unfair.
So, connecting the unconnected for us, it's about giving a voice to the farmers in this case, particularly small farmers. It's also about connecting smallholders with several options. So, apart from the voice, it's presenting options to these smallholders that are really in business or should be in business. Now, when we present them with options, we also need to understand that normally everybody looks at this as the buyer. What is the standard? What is the compliant? What do we need to do about it? So they have the standard for respecting the Now, we also need to combine this with the farmer requirement and the farmer perspective. You see, but the only the same also here. Now, just very briefly, looking at the farmer perspective means that they also have the agency to develop structure. Double certification, for example, multiple products, multiple markets. I'm selling domestically, I'm using food, I'm using cash crop, I'm selling regions, I'm also selling export China. Right? And that is where we start to have more resilient farmers, more resilient farming business. And this will create sustainability. So the lesson for the last 10 years of work I see this drawing from the government is that it's not an either or question. It's simply a way that we need to facilitate resilience strategies for business first and for environment strategies. So it's quite not some of this very
Thank you. Okay, let's take the gentleman here, because your hand is up sooner, and then we'll come to you. Please do keep them both brief, because otherwise the panel won't have any time to respond. Yes, yeah.
Yes, I only have a question. My name is Andrew. My question is that related to understand T4SD is functioning as the chairman of the Young Development Council. And I was wondering, this morning we talked about big data, and the examples that we brought up came all from global value chains, such as cocoa, coffee. And do you think that big data could, in the near future, become important for more regional crops, such as yam, for example? Or is it really at this time only initially global value chains?
Great question, and finally the gentleman.
So yeah, my question's a little bit similar, very related. I mean, hearing about wheat farm and the amount of data that can be collected from that. And also, so James Pennington, World Economic Forum, we work with quite a few, say, companies in the off-grid solar industry or some of these other industries. and they also have the side benefit of providing a service but collecting very interesting data as well. And also, so in other examples, there's I know a couple of researchers who are looking at taking use Pokemon Go pictures to get environmental data, obviously developed in context. But it seems like it's all kind of the equivalent thing in terms of being a traditional data sources, and that's very valuable for governments, for international organisations, anyone working on the ground. So obviously Pokemon Go is going to be one in the African smallholder sector, but there is any other of these interesting data sources which may be slightly atypical, but can give a better picture to policymakers and other people.
Okay, thank you. Those are really major questions. As far as Pokemon Go is concerned, just try with Nigerians. We've already heard a very loud, of course not. So, a non-starter in Nigeria, clearly. But let's take on the other questions that we've had. And panelists, please do take the opportunity to also wrap in any sort of final remarks as we're in our last 10 minutes together. So perhaps you can start with them and then finish.
Yes, I'll go straight to the question that was asked. Yes, I see data useful for that's why we are collecting data. Tell you a very simple, very small story. When we chose to go to control areas, we go down in sustainable way. And it's told that yam cannot survive working well. It's very different. We show you yam growing beautifully and healthy in control areas. So data is very important. We're also capturing what other things that those farmers are doing. So data will be useful. It will be useful to us in future in irrigation. It will be useful to us in knowing what varieties we're growing. And also, it will be very useful, especially in rural trade. Because currently, we do not even have a common standard for any of the products that we are producing, so that we can say, okay, I want yam of grade A or grade B. And this quantity, we don't have it. So for me, that's where I see data be very, very useful, very practical. I'm not very academic, so I like to do my things in a very practical way. And also, as a business person, I want to see where money is coming from. And I believe that's the way most of the farmers think. These farmers have been shown that when you can do this and make extra money from it, and they are very enthusiastic about it. I believe that is how we should look at standard issue when we're talking about what is, like I said, what is a very problem. That is
Thank you. I think a couple of points. Firstly, I believe big data has tremendous application locally. My estimation is not to keep the global tools until I understand that I have within my own demand. From the venture that we are looking at, data is obviously key, and it goes right down to measuring the progress of individuals as they go forward, and that's a different story. So, yes, we see a tremendous amount of value in data, including using big data and feeding big data tools, but in a controlled manner. I would like to pick up, perhaps as my final comment, on the whole question about resistance to change. In technology management, 5% is the critical point. And we apply much the same. We say all the people in the community or the farmers in the community, 5% will be ready to take the risk and put up their hands and say, yes, I know this technology. Within a very short period of time, you can find the champions. Once 5% have shown benefit, another 20% will come on board because farmers will follow farmers. If that 5% does not show benefit and we are working closely together, we stop the experiment if you like and we do something else or we redirect. Once we have 25%, we can then leave it because another 50% will follow and maybe 25% who never will change. But that initial 5% is critical. Any project we start, and we do not have a representative and respected 5%, it's too late. They will rather come in. Thank you. Thanks.
So to the question about Nigeria, you're the first to ask us that. I guess the reality is, yeah, we'd love to come to Nigeria in the future, but The small startup is in ton of us. So we need to prioritize on the 3 countries where we're currently focused on 10 year investment scale that. But I mean, our goal is to reach 1 million farmers by the end of next year, and then so on and so on to 100 million. So obviously we're looking at Nigeria. So if you've got contacts with our network operators or anyone who can scale, then definitely happy to have a conversation. For anyone else who has networks in any country.
And I think you love startups are like 1 million by next week. People been grafting for 10 years and they're like, did we just say 1 million? 1 million next week. That's fantastic. Can we ask you though, because maybe other people in the opinion, I definitely have, you don't put the cost on the farmer, so how do you pay for what? How do you sustain what you do yourselves? Because you are creating a fundamental service. So what's your revenue model?
So I guess it's kind of typical networks, you get the scale and monetize. But for us,
Free at 20%.
so for us it's about the data. Yeah, so creating that valuable data can help make decisions, businesses, NGOs, international organizations, to use that data, turn it into actionable insights, and manage risk, make better decisions, improve supply chains. That's our business model. I mean, we're startups, so that may change, but that's what we're going to do at the moment. About the kind of another question about kind of what are the typical data. I mean, I guess mobile money is a big one. Tesla, for example, getting so much information on his others, but about the literacy, I found really interesting phenomenon. One of our companies is named and what happened there? The CEO is trying to connect all the farmers with the producer and with the inventory management. So they provide to not their farmers, but their grandson and granddaughters of the farmers, the technology, and then the trainee in order to get the information from that new generation. So there is something interesting that is migration from new generation to the farm, from new generation to learn how to connect. And they are facing this challenge to connect. They are connected, and they are really valuable in that kind of job. Why? Because they're a social company, really strong and really important in new generation. And they are becoming interesting, and they are born with the key technology to be connected. So really that is really appreciated, and they really know, and most of them know to read and write. So that is important and valuable to business strategy. On the second hand, about the application in our business, I think that is important because we deploy a business maturity model that is based on data, on open data. In this model, on the last chain of the supply chain, as hotels and restaurants, will get the information about how they are. And there are more or less 28 companies, the most big companies in that sector in Colombia that decide to participate in that open data study and share with us how they are connected with the supply chain. And the result was not good, but good in the sense that there are a lot of opportunities to improve the sector, and that are issues that make sense when you connect the connected supply chain.
Thank you. Okay, after what I felt like was given the sort of high-level discussion that we had probably across the day, a bit of a reality check. Let's see if we can, as Bruce said there, let's take that final quiz or survey. Fingers up already? Oh, I still want to be a game show host. Just like one day. So if you're ready to go through that entire process, let's go back to that screen, please. Let's remind people what that is. No, wrong survey. We know we want to take meeting. the second question. One person has already agreed with question two. Fantastic. Okay, for those of you who don't know, I love it. The next session is on sort of mind reading and what future gazing. So there's someone here who should be on the panel. So the question is, by 2020, most producers in the developing world, it's a statement, most producers in the developing world will be able to access business-related information remotely via the internet. Do you agree or disagree? So 2023 a bit years away. After all that you've heard in terms of interest and literacy and access, do you think that by 2020, farmers will be getting business-related information, given how excitable we're about we found, which I was going to say we found, which is not a technology-based application, an internet-based application. Let's see.
Sorry, we do also, it is also virtual online.
No, you've scuppered my face now. Right, you're online as well. So it is tech, it's internet. Do farmers access you by the internet?
No, so our primary use is our SMS. So we're making it available to people who do have, mobile phones, but also.
Right. Okay. I'm just gonna ignore that. Just be like, you guys are SMS-based service.
So we are
Just to be clear for the purposes of this exercise. Okay. Let's take that as our result because our average has been around 60. So what started off as a fairly optimistic voting plan has been completely warped by the people who think that 4 years from now, or 3 years from now, is not enough time to get farmers or producers more broadly accessing business-related information via the internet. So this gives us a sense of how much work we still need to do. Before we can start talking about standards and open data, there's a question just about getting everyone, access and bridging that access gap. So as we mull this over and prepare for that last session, which is looking into the future, please give the panel a round of applause. For the refreshment needs, the good news is you don't have to trek all the way back up the stairs. We will be staying in the bunker. So if you just go out the doors, coffee and teas, I would imagine, but I haven't seen any. But coffees are definitely available for you just outside here. See you back.